Imagine it. A cold, grey morning in the New York City, 1927. The streets are alive with the restless hum of industry, of ambition, of dreams being built and broken in equal measure. But in a small, dimly lit office on Wall Street, one man sits alone, staring at a ledger that could crush him. The numbers aren't just numbers. They are the measure of a life spent chasing power, respect, and a vision that everyone else called reckless. That man is Harry Sinclair. Harry Sinclair wasn't born into wealth. He was born in 1876 in a world where oil was king and the men who tamed it were legends and predators. He grew up watching opportunities slip through the fingers of men too cautious, too polite to take the risks that carve names into history. From the beginning, Harry had fire in his eyes and a stubbornness that made teachers frown and bankers nervous. He believed that control wasn't given. It was seized. And he would seize it, sometimes in ways that would terrify the world around him. By the time he reached his 30s, he was already a man marked by audacity. He founded Sinclair Oil, and in every deal he touched, there was a gamble. And not the casual gamble of chance or luck. This was the kind of risk that could erase everything: reputation, fortune, freedom. The newspapers would later call him a maverick. His rivals called him reckless. But Harry, in his own mind, was just daring to dream bigger than anyone else dared to imagine. Now, picture him in that office, 1927. Every decision he had ever made, every contract signed in ink that could have been blood, had led to this moment. Outside, the world is buzzing with talk of scandal, corruption, and political entanglements. Inside, Harry stares at a pile of choices that could ruin him or make him immortal. And then the question presses itself into his mind with relentless weight. Do I fold and live safely, quietly, like everyone else? Or do I gamble everything and risk it all for a shot at legacy? It's a question that shakes the foundation of any man's soul. Would you have dared to bet your life, your reputation, your freedom on a dream so fragile yet so intoxicatingly powerful? Because for Harry Sinclair, the gamble wasn't theoretical, it was his life. And the world was about to find out just how far he was willing to go. Harry Sinclair's story didn't begin in boardrooms or with oil tycoons bowing at his feet. It began in the raw grit of Kansas and Oklahoma, with dusty roads, oil-stained hands, and the kind of hunger that gnaws at a man until he decides, I will not settle for small. He was a man who learned early that opportunity rarely knocks politely. It barges in, and if you hesitate, it disappears forever. In his 20s, Harry was scrambling. Jobs were temporary, deals often fell apart before contracts could even be signed, and investors laughed at his audacity. Too risky, they said. Too young, they said. But Harry saw what they didn't see. He saw black gold hidden in the ground like treasure buried by the earth itself. Every dry well was a story waiting to be written. Every rejected proposal was a challenge daring him to prove them wrong. And yet, the failures weighed on him. Nights alone in cheap hotel rooms, poring over maps and charts by candlelight, wondering if he had the guts or the luck to turn dreams into reality. There were moments when despair whispered, when even his iron will trembled. His brothers, colleagues, even his wife, began to question whether he had bitten off more than he could chew. But Harry had a stubborn rhythm in his blood. He refused to stop. The small wins came slowly. A patch of land that produced just enough oil to pay off debts. A local investor who finally took a chance, handing him a few $1,000s that felt like millions. Each win was fragile, a candle flickering against a storm. Yet Harry clung to them, savoring every taste of victory like a man starving for recognition. These were the sparks that lit the fire of Sinclair Oil, the company that would eventually bear his name and carry him into battles far larger than himself. But those early triumphs came with shadows. Rival tycoons circled, Regulators watched like hawks, and whispers of corruption began to echo in the halls of power. The world of oil wasn't just business, it was war. Every small victory was a gamble, and every gamble carried the risk of total ruin. Harry felt it in his gut every morning as he lit his cigar and stared at maps spread across his desk. One wrong move and the empire he envisioned could crumble before it even began. Yet he pressed on, because in those failures and small wins, he discovered something crucial. The man who dares to risk everything gains more than money. He gains the power to shape his own fate. And Harry Sinclair was about to gamble more than he ever had before, on a stage far larger than a single well, far more dangerous than anything he had faced. The question that lingered in his mind and would soon grip the world was this: could one man's daring outwit the entire system built to stop him? By the early 1910s, Harry Sinclair was no longer the underdog scrambling in dusty offices. He had learned to move like a shadow, quiet, precise, relentless. Every deal was calculated, every handshake a thread in a web that would one day stretch across the entire oil industry. He understood something few men did. Power isn't just about owning resources. It's about controlling the story, the perception, the very narrative of success. Sinclair Oil was no longer a fragile startup, it was a force. Harry acquired refineries, pipelines, and shipping routes with a ruthlessness that made competitors nervous. He wasn't just collecting assets, he was crafting an empire. Every acquisition was a chess move, every alliance a trapdoor for rivals who dared to underestimate him. And yet, amidst the strategy, there was always the risk of overreach. Every dollar borrowed, every legal loophole exploited, carried the weight of potential disaster. The man himself was a paradox. He could charm bankers in silk suits one day and threaten them with bankruptcy the next. He spoke softly, almost unassumingly, but his mind raced like a locomotive on fire. He understood the psychology of fear and ambition better than anyone. When others hesitated, he struck. When others doubted, he maneuvered. The Wall Street of the 1920s was a jungle, and Harry was a predator who thrived in chaos. But the rise wasn't just financial. Harry Sinclair's persona became legend. Parties in Manhattan whispered about the man who could bend the industry to his will, who moved deals across state lines and borders as if geography were meaningless. To some he was daring, visionary, unstoppable. To others he was dangerous, even unscrupulous. Yet Harry didn't care for opinion. He cared for results. He cared for legacy. Still, even as he built his empire, Harry knew the stakes. The higher he climbed, the more precarious his position became. He was courting not only wealth but scrutiny. Political figures, rival oil barons, and federal regulators began watching his every move. Every clever maneuver could be twisted into scandal. Every triumph carried a shadow, a whisper that he might one day fall as dramatically as he had risen. And yet, the adrenaline of empire building was addictive. Harry thrived on tension, on the risk that others avoided. He understood a truth that would define his life. The bigger the gamble, the more the world remembers you. He wasn't just rising in wealth. He was rising in legend, but empires have fault lines, and sometimes the boldest moves can crack the foundation. For Harry Sinclair, the defining gamble of his life was about to come, not in the quiet of a boardroom, not in a refinery, but in a scandal that would shake the country and test his audacity in ways he could never have imagined. Would he fold under pressure, or gamble everything and risk it all for the chance to emerge untouchable? Even as Harry Sinclair's empire stretched across states, there was a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. The world doesn't let a man rise without testing him. Every pipeline he controlled, every refinery he acquired, drew the eyes of rivals, regulators, and journalists alike. The higher he climbed, the sharper the scrutiny became. In the hallways of power, whispers started. In smoky clubs, rivals plotted. And in Washington, certain men began to see Harry not as a businessman, but as a challenge, a problem to be contained. Scandal has a way of creeping in quietly, like fog rolling over a city. For Sinclair, it started small. Accusations of underhanded deals, rumors of favoritism, a glance at contracts that seemed too clever to be entirely legal. Each whisper was a needle in his armor, and for a man who thrived on control, the sensation of being watched, of being doubted, was almost unbearable. Harry knew the stakes. His empire wasn't just money. It was his reputation, his legacy, the proof that his life's risks were justified. Losing that would be worse than bankruptcy. It would be invisibility, and yet Harry thrived under pressure. He had an uncanny ability to transform anxiety into strategy, scrutiny into opportunity. When his rivals attacked, he didn't cower. He countered with bold acquisitions, with alliances that stunned observers, and with financial maneuvers so audacious they bordered on theatrical. There was a certain poetry in it. The man who had been underestimated in dusty offices now controlled narratives, legislation, and sometimes even the fate of smaller competitors. He was becoming untouchable, or so it seemed. Still, the cracks were there. Friends warned him of overextension. Legal advisors urged caution. Political figures muttered about investigations. And Harry, who had spent years gambling on every deal, faced a new kind of risk, one that couldn't be measured in barrels of oil or dollars, but in scandal, public opinion, and government scrutiny. The stakes were personal now, and the pressure weighed like lead in his chest. Nights were restless. Decisions that once seemed clear now felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. Every choice carried the possibility of ruin. In private moments, Harry would sit alone in his office, the city lights spilling across his desk, and wonder if he had overplayed his hand. But then, almost instinctively, he would light a cigar, lean back in his chair, and remind himself that the game was never about comfort. It was about audacity. It was about seizing moments that terrified everyone else. It was about daring to risk everything when the stakes were highest, and that's exactly what he was about to do. Because in 1927, the year that would define Harry Sinclair, he would make a move so bold, so politically and financially dangerous, that it would leave the country in shock and set him on a path that few men could survive. Would his instinct for risk carry him to legendary heights, or would it finally become his undoing? The oil fields of Wyoming, the Teapot Dome, a place so remote it felt like the edge of the world, yet it held black gold that could make or break a man. Harry Sinclair stared at the landscape, wind biting through his coat, heart pounding not from cold, but from the weight of what he was about to do. This wasn't a simple business deal. This was a gamble that could define history. One wrong step, and it would destroy him. One perfect move, and it would cement his name forever. The lease of the Teapot Dome oil reserves was a prize coveted by politicians and tycoons alike. The government's hidden contracts, the labyrinth of bureaucracy, the whispers of corruption, it was all there. And Sinclair? He was ready to play the game no one else dared to play. The risk was staggering. Public scrutiny was inevitable. Laws could be bent, rules exploited, alliances tested, and yet for Harry, hesitation wasn't an option. Hesitation was surrender. He met with officials in dimly lit rooms, cigars glowing like beacons of courage and defiance. Every handshake, every whispered promise, every carefully constructed document was a master stroke of audacity. He navigated political favors, hidden incentives, and legal loopholes with a precision that was almost surgical. And as he signed the lease, one thought thundered in his mind. This is it. All or nothing, but the stakes weren't just legal or financial. They were psychological. Harry knew the world would watch him like a hawk. Enemies would wait for a misstep. Newspapers would dissect every move. And yet, the thrill of the gamble coursed through him like fire. He understood something few men ever grasp. Risk is intoxicating, but it's also a test of character. To win, you have to embrace fear, manipulate it, and make it your ally. As the deal was finalized, a strange mix of exhilaration and dread filled him. Every instinct screamed caution, every ambition screamed audacity. The tension was unbearable, like standing on the edge of a cliff with nothing but wind beneath your feet. But Sinclair didn't hesitate. He gambled everything, his fortune, his reputation, his freedom. And the world would soon see the consequences, because the Teapot Dome wasn't just a business move. It was a scandal waiting to erupt, a powder keg of politics, money, and betrayal. And Harry Sinclair, in his relentless pursuit of power and legacy, had just lit the fuse. Would he survive the explosion? Could a man who gambled everything truly come out on top? Or would the weight of ambition finally crush him? The news hit like a lightning strike. Teapot Dome. Harry Sinclair. Scandal. Washington roared with outrage. Newspapers splashed his name across headlines, and whispers of corruption echoed from every corner of the country. The man who had once commanded boardrooms with effortless charm now faced a storm of scrutiny he couldn't charm away. Every ally he had cultivated became a potential threat. Every deal he had orchestrated was now dissected under the harshest light imaginable. Sinclair didn't flinch, but inside the pressure was suffocating. In private, he paced his office, the weight of public outrage pressing down like an invisible hand. The threat of prison loomed. Senators shouted accusations, investigative committees grilled his every decision, and journalists dug relentlessly into every shadow of his empire. The world seemed to conspire against him, and even his own reflection in the mirror questioned, "Have I gone too far?" And yet, this was Harry Sinclair at his core. Pressure didn't break him, it honed him. He meticulously prepared for hearings, built legal defenses like a general planning a battle, and leveraged every connection he had nurtured over decades. Every move in court was calculated, precise, and unapologetically bold. He didn't just defend himself. He reshaped the narrative, twisting public perception with the same audacity he had shown when acquiring oil fields. The trial became a theatre. Every word, every gesture scrutinized. Some saw him as a villain, others as a master strategist who had dared to challenge the very system. And through it all, Sinclair maintained a steely composure. He had gambled everything, and now the game had shifted to a new battlefield, the court of public opinion. The psychological toll was immense. Sleepless nights, gnawing anxiety, and the constant fear that a single misstep could shatter everything. But in the crucible of scandal, Harry found clarity. He realized that survival wasn't just about legality. It was about perception, resilience, and the audacity to endure when everyone expects you to fall. When the verdicts finally came, Harry Sinclair had not only survived, they were tempered by fire. Some convictions, fines, and setbacks marked the surface, but beneath it all, his empire endured. And in the quiet aftermath, he understood something essential. True power isn't measured by avoiding risk, but by navigating it, surviving it, and using it to build a legacy stronger than fear itself. But the Teapot Dome scandal wasn't just a battle over oil, it was a lesson in courage, strategy, and human psychology. And Harry Sinclair's comeback was about to reveal the man's most enduring gift, his relentless, unflinching ability to turn catastrophe into opportunity. Would he rise from the ashes of scandal stronger than ever? Could the same man who gambled it all survive the fury of a nation scorned and emerge victorious? After the storm, Harry Sinclair emerged into a world that had expected him to crumble. The headlines had turned from outrage to curiosity, the whispers from crooked tycoon to remarkable survivor. Yet no one really knew the private toll, the nights spent staring at ceilings, replaying every deal, every signature, every risk, wondering if it had all been worth it. But Harry, in those moments of isolation, found the kernel of truth that would define his legacy. Survival is a strategy, and audacity is a weapon Sinclair didn't rebuild from scratch. He rebuilt from experience. Every lesson from the Teapot Dome scandal was burned into him. The importance of timing, of influence, of knowing not just the law, but the people who enforce it. He moved quietly, like a chess master surveying the board, making acquisitions, investing strategically, and avoiding the glare of public scrutiny while expanding his empire behind the scenes. It was a comeback of precision and patience, not reckless spectacle. He also understood something profoundly human. Resilience is psychological. The mind, more than the ledger, dictates the outcome. Harry mastered his fears, converting dread into fuel for meticulous planning. When competitors tried to exploit his vulnerabilities, he responded not with impulsive retaliation, but with measured, decisive maneuvers that reminded the industry why he had become a legend in the first place. Every victory, every quiet triumph reinforced a single truth. He could withstand chaos, survive scrutiny, and thrive in uncertainty, and yet it wasn't all strategy. There were moments of reflection, almost cinematic in their intensity. Solitary walks through Manhattan streets at night, cigar in hand, skyscrapers glowing like watchful sentinels. He thought about the young man who had once scrambled through dusty offices, who had gambled everything on a dream, who had stared into the abyss at Teapot Dome. He realized that survival wasn't just about wealth, it was about legacy, about the story one leaves behind, about teaching the world that courage and audacity can outlast scandal and fear. Slowly the narrative shifted. Harry Sinclair's name became synonymous not only with oil and wealth, but with the audacity to take risks, the brilliance to survive them, and the psychological fortitude to rebuild stronger than ever. He didn't just return to prominence, he reshaped the perception of power itself, demonstrating that true mastery comes not from avoiding danger, but from navigating it with unyielding resolve. And in the quiet moments, when the empire hummed around him, Sinclair likely smiled at the irony. The same gamble that could have destroyed him had, in fact, immortalized him. A man who had risked everything had learned the ultimate truth: audacity. Resilience and psychological mastery are more valuable than any barrel of oil, any contract or any headline, but every story has its final question. For Harry Sinclair, the gamble had ended, but for you watching now, the challenge remains. If life tested you like it tested him, could you survive? Could you rebuild stronger? Could you turn scandal and risk into triumph? Picture this: Harry Sinclair, older now, walking through the vast hallways of his offices, the walls lined with maps, contracts, and the silent echoes of decisions that once shook a nation. The man who gambled everything, his fortune, his reputation, even his freedom, stood unbowed, a testament to audacity, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of legacy. There's a quiet power in that image, a psychological truth that transcends time. Life doesn't reward caution, it rewards courage. Sinclair's story isn't just about oil or money. It's about the human capacity to navigate risk, to confront fear, and to seize opportunities when the world expects you to falter. Every setback he endured, the ridicule, the scandal, the courtroom battles, was a test of character. And every triumph, from small victories to empire building, was the reward of a mind willing to embrace uncertainty and act decisively. Think about it. How many times have we hesitated because the stakes were too high? How many times have we let fear dictate decisions that could have reshaped our lives? Sinclair's life is a mirror, reflecting the truth that fortune favors the bold, but only if boldness is paired with relentless strategy, careful timing, and psychological fortitude. He gambled everything, yes, but he also mastered the game. reading the currents of risk, influence, and human behavior with uncanny precision. And here's the cinematic truth for you. Sitting there watching, every one of us faces our own Teapot Dome moments, moments where fear whispers, where hesitation could cost us everything, where the choice to risk or fold defines the trajectory of our lives. Sinclair's legacy isn't merely historical, it's deeply personal. It challenges us to ask the hardest question of all. When the stakes are monumental, will you act? Or will you stand frozen, hoping fortune chooses you? So take a moment. Let the story sink in. Let the tension, the audacity, and the triumph echo in your mind. And then ask yourself, truly ask yourself, if life tested you like it tested Harry Sinclair, would you have the courage to gamble everything? Would you survive the pressure, embrace the fear, and emerge stronger, wiser, unstoppable? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have folded, or would you have risked it all and, like Harry Sinclair, carved your name into history? The story isn't over until you decide.